Listen carefully. Your life is not hard because you lack talent. It is hard because you tolerate weakness. Every complaint you repeat trains your mind to quit. Every excuse you accept gives your discipline permission to disappear. This audiobook is not here to motivate you. It is here to remove what is ruining you: emotional softness, mental noise, and the habit of explaining instead of executing. From this moment forward, there are only two options: results or responsibility. No complaints, no excuses. Just results. Chapter 1. Stop complaining. It is training you to fail. Complaining feels harmless. It feels like release. It feels like honesty. But that feeling is the trap. Complaining is not communication, and it is not problem solving. Complaining is conditioning. Every time you complain, you teach your nervous system a single lesson: someone else should fix this. That is the key. The moment your mind expects relief instead of responsibility, progress slows. Then it stops. You have a choice. You can train your mind for results, or you can train it for excuses. There is no middle ground. Complaining is a daily rehearsal for helplessness. It wires your body to respond to discomfort with words instead of action, with explanation instead of execution. The more you do it, the more natural it feels. What starts as a habit becomes an identity. What you repeat, you reinforce. What you reinforce, you become. Most people never realize they are training themselves to fail because the damage is quiet and gradual. Nothing collapses immediately. Life just stops moving forward. Look closely at people who perform at a high level, not what they post publicly, not what they say when things are going well, but how they speak when pressure appears. They do not narrate their suffering. They do not dramatize inconvenience. They do not turn obstacles into stories. They reduce problems to tasks. They ask one question: what is required now? This is not because they lack emotion. It is because they refuse to feed emotion with unnecessary language. Language becomes identity. If your language is weak, your standards follow. If your language is disciplined, your behavior aligns. You do not need their permission to be disciplined. You do not need sympathy, agreement, or understanding. You have a choice. Most people complain because it gives them something without demanding anything in return: attention without progress, connection without accountability, relief without results. The cost does not show up immediately, which is why the habit survives. But the cost always arrives. It shows up as stagnation, as mental fatigue, as the feeling of being busy without moving forward. It is not about stress. It is about discipline. When you complain, your brain releases tension temporarily. That chemical relief teaches your system that talking equals solving. Over time, your body learns to wait for expression instead of action. The moment pressure appears, execution is delayed. That is the key. High performers remove verbal negativity not because they are emotionally closed, but because they are precise. They understand that words are instructions to the mind. Every sentence either builds momentum or erodes it. You do not need to vent. You need to decide. Decide what is within your control. Decide what action is required. Then move. Complaining keeps you locked in analysis. Discipline moves you into execution. You have a choice. Look at how often people complain about things they continue to tolerate: jobs they will not leave, habits they will not change, people they will not confront. Complaining becomes a substitute for courage. Talking replaces action. Time passes. This is not bad luck. This is training. Every complaint strengthens the muscle of avoidance. Every complaint makes the next one easier. What you repeat, you reinforce. What you reinforce, you become. This is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about refusing to poison your own momentum. There is a difference between stating a fact and indulging in weakness. Facts are short and neutral. Complaints are emotional and repetitive. Facts lead to decisions. Complaints lead to stagnation. You do not need their permission to be calm under pressure. You do not need approval to raise your standards. You have a choice. If something can be fixed, fix it. If it cannot be fixed immediately, train through it. But do not narrate your discomfort as if it deserves attention. Your mind listens to you every time. If you tell yourself something is hard, your nervous system tightens. If you tell yourself it is required, your system adapts. That is the key. Observe elite environments carefully. Military units, professional sports teams, high-performing organizations. Complaining is not encouraged, not because emotions are forbidden, but because emotional leakage destroys precision. They understand something most people never learn. Discipline starts with what you allow yourself to say. You do not need motivation to stop complaining. You need standards. It is not about positivity. It is about control. Complaining hands control to circumstances. Discipline takes it back. You have a choice. Begin noticing your language immediately. Notice how often you explain why something is difficult. Notice how often you announce frustration instead of adjusting behavior. Interrupt yourself mid-thought. Replace explanation with action. That interruption is uncomfortable. That discomfort is discipline being installed. This is not about suppressing reality. It is about refusing to rehearse defeat. Every time you do not complain, you strengthen restraint. Every time you act instead, you strengthen trust in yourself. Self-trust compounds quietly. What you repeat, you reinforce. What you reinforce, you become. This chapter is not asking you to be silent forever. It is asking you to be intentional. Speak when it moves things forward. Stay quiet when speech is only emotional discharge. You do not need their permission to grow stronger. You do not need to be understood to be disciplined. You have a choice. Complaining feels like relief. Discipline feels like resistance. One builds weakness, the other builds results. And results are the only language that matters. You are not exhausted because life is unfair. You are exhausted because your energy leaks through unnecessary words. Plug the leak. This is where mental toughness begins, not in motivation, not in inspiration, but in restraint. Stop complaining, not because life is easy, but because you are serious. You have removed the habit that trains you to fail. Now it is time to confront the next illusion, the one that sounds reasonable, logical, and harmless, yet quietly keeps you stuck. You stop complaining. Now let us expose the next weakness. Chapter 2. Excuses are decisions in disguise. Excuses sound reasonable. That is why they are dangerous. They come dressed as logic, timing, fatigue, or fairness. But underneath, they all say the same thing. Not now. An excuse is not a failure of intelligence. It is a quiet decision to stay the same while pretending you tried. That is the key. The moment you accept an excuse, you have already chosen comfort over growth. You have a choice. You can tell the truth about what you are avoiding, or you can protect the excuse that keeps you where you are. Most people think excuses appear after failure. In reality, excuses appear before action. They are created to prevent discomfort. Fatigue becomes an excuse. Lack of motivation becomes an excuse. Bad timing becomes an excuse. These are not problems. They are conditions. Disciplined people do not wait for conditions to improve. They adjust behavior under the conditions they have. It is not about energy. It is about standards. If it mattered, it would be done. If it is not done, it did not matter. You have a choice. You can ask how you feel, or you can ask what is required. One question leads to delay. The other leads to results. Excuses thrive in emotional thinking. Discipline operates in mechanical thinking. When a disciplined person is tired, they reduce the task, not eliminate it. When timing is imperfect, they start anyway. When motivation is absent, they rely on routine. That is the difference. They remove excuses before excuses appear. Fatigue is one of the most common lies people tell themselves. Yes, you are tired. That is not new. You were tired yesterday. You will be tired tomorrow. Fatigue does not stop disciplined people. It forces them to simplify. It forces them to show up smaller, not disappear completely. Doing less is still doing. Doing nothing is a decision. If it mattered, it would be done. If it is not done, it did not matter. Timing is another favorite excuse. Waiting for the right moment feels intelligent. It feels strategic. But most of the time it is avoidance disguised as patience. The right time rarely arrives. Momentum is created by starting in imperfect conditions. Disciplined people do not ask if now is ideal. They ask if now is possible. That is the key. Progress does not require perfect timing. It requires movement. Motivation is the most misunderstood concept of all. People believe motivation is something you wait for. In reality, motivation is something you earn after action begins. Disciplined people do not negotiate with their feelings. They move first. Feelings follow. Waiting to feel ready is an excuse that sounds responsible but keeps you stuck. You do not need motivation. You need commitment. You do not need inspiration. You need structure. You do not need their permission to act tired. You do not need approval to begin unmotivated. You have a choice. Excuses give you emotional safety, but they steal your future. Every time you excuse yourself, you reinforce the identity of someone who almost tries. Almost is a dangerous place to live. Almost builds regret quietly. Watch people who produce results consistently. They remove friction before it becomes an excuse. They prepare in advance. They simplify decisions. They design routines that operate even when discipline feels low. They do not rely on willpower. They rely on systems. That is not talent. That is preparation. That is discipline. If it mattered, it would be done. If it is not done, it did not matter. This sentence is uncomfortable because it is honest. It removes the emotional cover excuses provide. It forces you to see your behavior clearly, not your intentions, not your plans, your actions. And action never lies. You have a choice. You can continue explaining why something is difficult, or you can remove the explanation and act anyway. Stop asking yourself if you feel like it. Start asking yourself if you decided to be the kind of person who finishes. That shift changes everything. It is not about being harsh. It is about being accurate. Excuses do not disappear on their own. They must be confronted. The moment you hear one forming in your mind, label it. Say it clearly. This is an excuse. Then remove it. Reduce the task. Shorten the time. Lower the intensity, but do not eliminate the action. Elimination is surrender. Adjustment is discipline. You do not need their permission to expect more from yourself. You do not need validation to raise your standards. You have a choice. Excuses protect comfort. Discipline builds trust. Trust in yourself is built every time you act despite resistance. That trust compounds, slowly, quietly, powerfully. If it mattered, it would be done. If it is not done, it did not matter. Repeat it until your behavior changes. Not to shame yourself, but to see clearly. Clarity creates movement. Movement creates results. You have removed complaining. You are now removing excuses. You are stripping away the behaviors that keep you stagnant while pretending you are trying. This is not punishment. This is precision. And precision is what creates momentum. You have made a decision. Now it is time to protect it. That means eliminating the next leak, the one that drains focus and fractures execution without making noise. You learned how excuses hide as logic. Now you must learn how distraction hides as normal. That is where most discipline dies. You faced your excuses. Now let us talk about emotional weakness. Chapter 3. Emotional weakness is not honesty. Emotional expression is often confused with truth. People are told that venting is healthy, that oversharing is authenticity, that releasing every feeling is honesty. That belief sounds supportive, but it quietly weakens you. Emotional weakness is not honesty. It is a lack of control disguised as self-awareness. That is the key. The moment you treat every emotion as something that must be expressed, you surrender authority over your own state. You have a choice. You can control the emotion, or the emotion controls the outcome. Venting feels productive because it reduces tension in the moment, but relief is not resolution. When you vent, you reinforce the idea that pressure requires expression instead of regulation. Over time, your nervous system learns that discomfort should be released outward instead of stabilized internally. This does not build strength. It builds dependence. Dependence on listeners, dependence on validation, dependence on being understood before you can move forward. You have a choice. You can process emotion privately and act deliberately, or you can perform emotion publicly and delay action. One builds self-trust, the other erodes it. Self-trust is not built by being expressive. It is built by being consistent. When your emotions dictate your behavior, consistency disappears. When discipline governs emotion, stability appears. Oversharing weakens authority because it blurs boundaries. Leaders who explain every frustration lose gravity. Athletes who narrate every doubt lose edge. This is not about suppressing emotion. It is about containment. High performers feel deeply, but they express selectively. They understand that emotional output is energy. Where you release it matters. Control the emotion, or the emotion controls the outcome. Look at elite leaders under pressure. They do not collapse into explanation. They simplify. They slow their speech. They regulate tone. That regulation is not coldness. It is command. People feel safer around someone who is stable. Teams perform better when the leader does not emotionally leak into the environment. Emotional stability is contagious. So is emotional chaos. You do not need their permission to be composed. You do not need approval to keep things private. You have a choice. Many people overshare because they confuse vulnerability with dumping. True vulnerability is intentional. Emotional dumping is impulsive. One builds connection, the other builds weakness. Athletes understand this instinctively. In competition, they do not vent fear mid-performance. They control breathing. They control posture. They control focus. Why? Because they know that emotion unmanaged becomes interference. Interference costs results. Control preserves clarity. Control the emotion, or the emotion controls the outcome. Honesty does not require narration. You can acknowledge emotion without giving it the microphone. Saying this is frustrating internally is different from broadcasting frustration repeatedly. One leads to adjustment, the other leads to stagnation. Emotional discipline is knowing when expression serves progress and when it sabotages it. You have a choice. You can let emotion decide your tone, your timing, and your behavior, or you can decide those things yourself. Emotional weakness hands decision-making to impulse. Discipline takes it back. Most people believe expressing emotion makes them lighter. In reality, repeated expression keeps emotion alive. The more you talk about it, the more you feed it. That is the key. Attention amplifies whatever it touches. If you keep giving attention to frustration, it grows. If you redirect attention to action, emotion settles. High performers do not eliminate emotion. They channel it. They convert pressure into precision. They convert anger into focus. They convert fear into preparation. That conversion only happens when emotion is contained long enough to be useful. You do not need their permission to be silent when emotional. You do not need validation to stay composed. You have a choice. Silence is not avoidance when it is intentional. Silence is discipline when it preserves clarity. Control the emotion, or the emotion controls the outcome. Notice how often people talk themselves into weakness. They explain why something feels overwhelming. They narrate stress until stress feels permanent. They repeat stories of pressure until pressure becomes identity. This is not honesty. This is rehearsal, and rehearsed emotions become habits. Emotional control is not denial. It is timing. You choose when to reflect, when to release, and when to act. Disciplined people process emotion in private spaces, at controlled times, not in the middle of execution. That separation protects momentum. You have a choice. You can be ruled by how you feel in the moment, or you can be guided by who you decided to become. One path is reactive. The other is intentional. One leaks energy. The other concentrates it. Think about moments when you regret speaking emotionally. The damage is rarely about the feeling itself. It is about loss of respect, loss of leverage, loss of self-trust. Once spoken, words cannot be pulled back. Discipline teaches you to pause before release. Control the emotion, or the emotion controls the outcome. This is why elite environments emphasize composure. Calm is not accidental. Calm is trained. It is trained through breathing, posture, language, and restraint. These are not personality traits. They are skills. Skills can be practiced. You do not need to change who you are. You need to change how you respond. That is empowering. That puts control back in your hands. You have a choice. The next time emotion rises, do not ask how to express it. Ask how to stabilize it. Slow down your breathing, lower your voice, reduce your words. Action becomes clearer when emotion is quiet. Emotional weakness seeks witnesses. Emotional strength seeks outcomes. One looks for relief, the other looks for resolution. Relief fades. Resolution lasts. Control the emotion, or the emotion controls the outcome. This chapter is not asking you to become numb. It is asking you to become precise. Precision requires restraint. Restraint builds authority. Authority builds results. You have now removed complaining. You have exposed excuses. You are learning to regulate emotion instead of performing it. This is how mental toughness is built from the inside out. Quietly, consistently, you have strengthened control over your inner state. Now it is time to protect the most valuable resource you have left, the one emotion and excuses constantly drain without you noticing. You learned how expression weakens execution. Now you must learn how distraction destroys it. Chapter 4. Discipline is built in boring moments. Most people believe discipline is forged in dramatic moments, breakthroughs, turning points, sudden surges of motivation. That belief is comforting, and it is wrong. Results are not created in intensity. They are created in repetition. Discipline is built in boring moments, the ones that do not feel important, the ones that do not get applause, the ones you are tempted to skip because no one is watching. That is the key. Boring done daily beats intense done rarely. You have a choice. You can wait for moments that feel powerful, or you can commit to moments that feel ordinary. One builds fantasy, the other builds dominance. Boredom is not the enemy of progress. It is the gateway. The moment you can perform without stimulation, without excitement, without novelty, you have crossed into a different category of control. Most people are addicted to intensity. They train hard for a week, then disappear. They work late one night, then coast for days. They change everything at once, then collapse. This pattern feels productive, but it is unstable. Discipline does not live in spikes, it lives in loops. Daily habit loops that repeat whether you feel inspired or not. Waking, training, working, resting, repeating. That is where results are built. Boring done, daily beats, intense, done rarely. Look at waking routines. The disciplined person does not debate the alarm. They do not negotiate with fatigue. They rise because that is what happens next. No drama, no analysis. The decision was made in advance. That removes friction, that preserves energy. The undisciplined person waits to feel ready. They scroll, they delay, they explain. The morning is gone before the day begins. You have a choice. You can make discipline automatic, or you can make excuses habitual. Automation beats willpower every time. The fewer decisions you leave to mood, the stronger your consistency becomes. That is not about being rigid. It is about being reliable. Training works the same way. Results do not come from heroic sessions fueled by emotion. They come from showing up consistently, adjusting intensity when necessary, and never disappearing completely. Disciplined people train even when energy is low. They shorten the session. They reduce the load. They simplify, but they do not skip. Skipping trains avoidance. Adjusting trains resilience. Boring done daily beats, intense done rarely. Work is no different. People wait for focus instead of building it. They wait for clarity instead of creating structure. Disciplined people block time. They sit down. They begin. Focus arrives after action starts, not before. Boredom appears early because the mind resists effort. That resistance is the signal you are in the right place. That is the key. When it feels boring, you are training the muscle that most people never touch. You do not need their permission to work without excitement. You do not need approval to repeat simple actions. You have a choice. You can chase stimulation, or you can cultivate stamina. Stimulation fades quickly. Stamina compounds. Boredom exposes who you really are. Anyone can perform when inspired. Very few can perform when nothing feels urgent. That is why boring moments separate amateurs from professionals. Professionals do not require novelty. They require standards. Think about how often people quit routines not because they are ineffective, but because they are dull. The mind craves variety. Discipline ignores that craving. Discipline understands that effectiveness is often monotonous. The strongest structures are simple and repeated. Boring done daily beats intense done rarely. Daily habit loops create identity. When you wake at the same time, train consistently, and work in focus blocks, you stop asking who you want to become. Your behavior answers for you. Identity becomes behavioral, not aspirational. That shift removes doubt. You do not feel disciplined, you act disciplined. Feeling follows later. You have a choice. You can keep searching for methods that excite you, or you can commit to methods that work. Excitement is optional, execution is not. Most people underestimate how powerful small, repeated actions are because they do not produce immediate emotional reward. But the nervous system adapts quietly. Strength accumulates silently. Confidence builds without announcement. One day you notice you are no longer negotiating with yourself. That is dominance. Boredom is not emptiness. It is focus without noise. It is repetition without distraction. It is the absence of novelty forcing you to confront resistance directly. That confrontation is training. You do not need motivation to repeat basics. You need acceptance. Acceptance that mastery is unglamorous. Acceptance that results are earned through repetition, not discovery. Boring done, daily beats, intense done, rarely. Notice how elite performers protect their routines. They do not constantly change systems, they refine them. They do not add complexity, they remove it. Simplicity is sustainable. Sustainability is power. You have a choice. You can live reactively, chasing peaks and recovering from crashes, or you can live rhythmically, building momentum through consistency. Rhythm stabilizes emotion. Rhythm stabilizes focus. Rhythm stabilizes identity. This chapter is not asking you to lower ambition. It is asking you to raise standards. High standards do not require excitement. They require follow-through. They require showing up on days that feel identical to the last. That is where mental toughness is built. Boredom trains patience. Patience trains endurance. Endurance produces results. If you only act when it feels meaningful, you will act rarely. If you act because it is scheduled, you will act consistently. Consistency wins. Boring done daily beats intense done rarely. This is where quiet discipline begins to take shape. Not in speeches, not in promises, in routines no one applauds, in habits no one sees, in repetitions that feel invisible. You have now learned to remove complaints. You have exposed excuses. You have regulated emotion. Now you are installing structure. Structure is what carries discipline forward when motivation disappears. You have learned to work without excitement. Next, you must learn to move without explanation. Because even disciplined routines can be weakened by one habit that leaks energy and authority. You have built consistency. Now you must protect it. Chapter 5. Stop explaining yourself. Most explanations are not about clarity. They're about comfort. Explaining is often a subconscious request for permission, approval, or validation. It is the mind asking, "Is this okay?" instead of deciding, "This is done." That is the key. The moment you feel the urge to explain yourself, you are usually revealing uncertainty, not providing information. You have a choice. You can act and let results speak, or you can talk and hope to be understood. Explaining feels responsible. It feels polite. It feels mature. But most of the time, it weakens authority. People who explain excessively train others to question their decisions. They invite debate where none is required. They turn execution into conversation. Disciplined people do not explain what they are about to do. They do it. Results explain everything. Words explain nothing. Look at real-world environments where credibility matters. Leaders who announce plans before delivering outcomes lose leverage. Professionals who justify every decision dilute confidence. Athletes who talk about potential before performance lose edge. Silent execution builds trust faster than any explanation ever could. That is not arrogance. That is precision. You have a choice. You can speak to feel safe, or you can stay quiet and let action create certainty. Certainty comes from follow-through, not from language. Every explanation carries risk. Once you explain, you open space for doubt, disagreement, and delay. When you act, you close that space. Results explain everything. Words explain nothing. Most people explain because they fear being misunderstood. But being misunderstood temporarily is less damaging than being ineffective permanently. Discipline does not require universal agreement. It requires internal alignment. You do not need their permission to move forward. You do not need consensus to act. Explaining is often a defense mechanism. It protects the ego from judgment. It softens commitment. It creates an exit if things go wrong. I tried. I meant well. You don't understand the context. Disciplined people remove these escape routes. They commit fully, then accept responsibility for the outcome without commentary. You have a choice. You can build credibility slowly through explanation or rapidly through consistency. Consistency leaves no room for debate. It creates reputation. Reputation is built by repeated results, not repeated reasoning. Watch people who are respected quietly. They speak less about intention and more through behavior. They do not narrate effort. They deliver outcomes. Over time, others stop asking for explanations because results have already answered the question. Results explain everything. Words explain nothing. This does not mean you never communicate. It means you communicate after execution, not before. It means you report outcomes, not intentions. It means you replace promises with performance. That shift changes how others perceive you and how you perceive yourself. Explaining drains energy. Every justification costs focus. Every defense consumes attention. That energy could be used to execute. Disciplined people conserve energy by removing unnecessary speech. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is efficiency. You do not need their permission to be efficient. You do not need validation to act decisively. You have a choice. You can keep explaining why something matters, or you can make it matter through action. Notice how often people explain plans that never happen. The explanation becomes the reward. Talking creates the illusion of progress. Discipline sees through that illusion. Discipline demands proof. Results explain everything. Words explain nothing. When you stop explaining, you remove pressure to perform for approval. You perform for standards instead. Standards are stable. Approval is unpredictable. One builds confidence. The other builds anxiety. This chapter is about reclaiming authority. Authority over your time. Authority over your energy. Authority over your direction. When you act without explaining, you send a signal to yourself first. You signal seriousness. You signal commitment. You signal that your decisions are not up for negotiation. You have a choice. You can continue narrating your intentions, or you can start delivering outcomes. One keeps you busy, the other moves you forward. Silence paired with action is powerful. It removes distraction. It removes doubt. It removes the need to defend. It allows you to focus fully on execution. Results explain everything. Words explain nothing. You have learned to build discipline in boring moments. Now you must protect that discipline from noise. Explanation is noise. It invites interference. To move further, you must learn to guard your attention as fiercely as your time. You have stopped complaining. You have eliminated excuses. You have regulated emotion. You have installed routine. You have removed unnecessary explanation. Now you are ready to confront the next decision that defines who you become, the decision to focus or to fracture yourself across distractions. You have built structure. Now you must protect it. Chapter 6. Focus is a moral decision. Most people treat focus as a productivity issue. It is not. Focus is a moral decision. It is a declaration of what you respect. Every time you allow yourself to be distracted, you are not losing attention by accident. You are choosing something else over your goals. That is the key. What you allow to distract you decides who you become. You have a choice. You can protect your attention, or you can spend it carelessly and wonder why progress feels slow. Distraction is not neutral. It is not harmless. It is a form of disrespect toward your own intentions. You set goals, you make plans, then you abandon them for stimulation. That pattern teaches your mind that comfort outranks commitment. Over time, your goals stop feeling serious because your behavior tells the truth. Behavior always tells the truth. You have a choice. You can live reactively, responding to whatever demands attention, or you can live deliberately, deciding what deserves it. Reactive living feels busy. Deliberate living produces results. The difference is focus. Dopamine traps are everywhere. Endless scrolling, constant notifications, background noise, multitasking. These are not conveniences. They are interruptions disguised as normal life. Each one fragments your attention. Fragmented attention produces shallow work. Shallow work produces mediocre outcomes. That is the chain. What you allow to distract you decides who you become. People say they cannot focus because the world is noisy. The truth is they have not set boundaries. Focus is not found, it is enforced. Disciplined people do not wait for quiet. They create it. They silence notifications. They block time. They remove temptation before temptation appears. That is not extreme. That is respect for the task. You do not need their permission to disconnect. You do not need approval to protect your attention. You have a choice. Every boundary you set is a statement of priority. Every boundary you avoid is a compromise. Constant stimulation trains your brain to crave novelty. When novelty disappears, boredom appears. When boredom appears, you reach for distraction. This loop weakens focus over time. Disciplined people break the loop by staying with boredom. They let the urge pass. They remain. That staying is training. Focus is not about intensity. It is about duration. Anyone can concentrate briefly. Very few can concentrate deeply and repeatedly. Deep focus requires discomfort. It requires saying no repeatedly. It requires disappointing distractions. What you allow to distract you decides who you become. Reactive living feels responsive, but it is actually submissive. Your environment dictates your behavior. Notifications decide your schedule. Other people's urgency becomes your priority. Over time, your own goals become background noise. This is not bad luck. This is choice. You have a choice. You can respect your goals enough to give them undivided attention, or you can treat them casually and accept casual results. Focus is the difference between intention and execution. High performers understand this. They do not attempt to focus while remaining available to everything. They remove availability. They create periods where nothing else exists. That isolation is not selfish. It is necessary. Results require undivided attention. You do not need their permission to be unavailable. You do not need validation to protect your time. Silence notifications. Close tabs. Remove apps. These are not productivity hacks. They are moral decisions. They say, this matters more than distraction. What you allow to distract you decides who you become. Multitasking is another illusion. It feels efficient. It is not. It fractures thought. It increases error. It drains energy. Disciplined people do one thing at a time. They finish. Completion builds momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Focus is fragile when left to mood. It is strong when supported by structure. Set specific times for deep work. Define clear tasks. Remove options. Options create hesitation. Simplicity creates flow. You have a choice. You can allow your attention to be traded for entertainment, or you can invest it in outcomes. Attention is currency. Spend it where it produces return. Most people do not fail because they are incapable. They fail because they are distracted. Distraction prevents depth. Depth creates mastery. Mastery changes everything. What you allow to distract you decides who you become. This chapter is not about becoming rigid or disconnected. It is about becoming intentional. Intentionality requires sacrifice. You sacrifice stimulation now to gain results later. That trait is discipline. You have learned to stop explaining yourself. Now you must stop dividing yourself. Focus unifies effort. Without it, discipline leaks. You have removed complaints, excuses, emotional leakage, inconsistency, and unnecessary explanation. Now you are guarding attention. This is how mental toughness becomes operational. But focus alone is not enough. Even focused people fail when comfort becomes the priority. To continue, you must confront the habit that quietly erodes discipline from the inside. You have protected your attention. Now you must challenge your comfort. Chapter 7. Comfort is the enemy you feed daily. Comfort feels like safety. It feels like rest. It feels like balance. But comfort is deceptive. It weakens urgency, dulls standards, and delays action while convincing you that nothing is wrong. That is the key. Comfort does not attack you loudly, it sedates you quietly. If it feels comfortable, it is costing you something. You have a choice. You can prioritize comfort or you can prioritize progress. You cannot fully do both. Comfort tells you to wait. Wait until you feel ready. Wait until conditions improve. Wait until confidence arrives. That waiting feels responsible. It feels patient. In reality, it is avoidance dressed as wisdom. People who wait to feel ready stay in preparation indefinitely. People who act while uncomfortable build momentum. Momentum does not come from certainty. It comes from movement. If it feels comfortable, it is costing you something. Look at how often people choose comfort without realizing it. They delay hard conversations. They postpone difficult tasks. They soften standards to avoid discomfort. Each choice feels small. Each choice feels harmless. But comfort compounds. Over time, urgency fades. Standards drop. Action slows. Life becomes easier but smaller. You have a choice. You can tolerate discomfort now, or you can tolerate regret later. Discomfort is temporary. Regret lingers. Disciplined people understand this trade. They choose short-term discomfort to protect long-term growth. Comfort dulls standards because it removes pressure. When nothing feels urgent, everything feels optional. Optional tasks are rarely completed. Optional standards are rarely upheld. Disciplined people make commitments non-negotiable. They remove comfort from decision-making. They decide in advance what will be done regardless of mood. If it feels comfortable, it is costing you something. Readiness is another comfort illusion. People believe they must feel confident before acting. In reality, confidence is built after action. Acting while uncomfortable trains courage. Acting only when comfortable trains dependence. You do not become brave by waiting. You become brave by moving through discomfort repeatedly. You do not need their permission to be uncomfortable. You do not need approval to act before you feel ready. You have a choice. Comfort seeks reassurance. Discipline seeks progress. High performers intentionally introduce discomfort. They train harder than necessary. They set deadlines that stretch them. They seek feedback that challenges them. This is not self-punishment. It is calibration. Discomfort sharpens awareness. Comfort dulls it. If it feels comfortable, it is costing you something. Comfort also hides in routine when routine loses intention. Discipline requires discomfort even within structure. Repeating the same actions at the same intensity forever leads to stagnation. Disciplined people adjust difficulty. They increase load. They raise standards. They refuse to coast. You have a choice. You can maintain comfort or you can maintain growth. Growth always requires friction. Without friction, there is no adaptation. People often confuse self-care with comfort. True self-care restores capacity. Comfort avoids challenge. Rest is strategic. Avoidance is habitual. Knowing the difference requires honesty. That honesty is discipline. If it feels comfortable, it is costing you something. Notice how often comfort speaks softly. It says, "You can do this later." "You deserve a break." "This is good enough." Sometimes those statements are true. Often they are excuses wearing soft language. Disciplined people question comfort. They do not obey it automatically. You do not need their permission to raise your standards. You do not need validation to choose the harder path. You have a choice. The hard path builds strength. The easy path builds dependency. Comfort weakens urgency because it removes stakes. When stakes are low, effort follows. Disciplined people create stakes. They set consequences. They hold themselves accountable even when no one else is watching. If it feels comfortable, it is costing you something. This chapter is not about eliminating rest. It is about eliminating complacency. Rest is intentional and limited. Complacency is passive and endless. One restores energy, the other drains ambition. Discomfort signals growth. When something feels challenging, you are expanding capacity. When everything feels easy, you are maintaining. Maintenance does not produce transformation. You have a choice. You can feed comfort daily, or you can starve it selectively. Starving comfort does not mean suffering constantly. It means choosing effort when effort is required. If it feels comfortable, it is costing you something. You have now confronted the habits that keep most people average. Complaining, excuses, emotional leakage, inconsistency, explanation, distraction, and comfort. You are stripping away the behaviors that weaken discipline quietly. Now it is time to install something stronger in their place. Discipline is not just avoidance. It is reliability. Reliability to yourself. You have challenged comfort. Now you must build trust. Chapter 8. Become reliable to yourself. Most people think self-respect is a feeling. It is not. Self-respect is behavioral. It is built or destroyed by what you do after you make a promise to yourself. That is the key. Every promise you keep strengthens trust. Every promise you break weakens it. You have a choice. You can become someone you rely on, or someone you constantly negotiate with. Reliability to yourself is the foundation of discipline. Without it, motivation becomes meaningless. Confidence becomes fragile. Goals become suggestions instead of commitments. When you stop trusting your own word, you start seeking external pressure to move. That dependence is weakness. Disciplined people eliminate it by becoming predictable to themselves. I do what I say. Every time. No negotiation. This identity is not built through dramatic vows. It is built through small actions repeated consistently. Waking up when you said you would, completing the task you scheduled, finishing what you start, closing loops. These behaviors seem minor, but they compound. Each closed loop reinforces the belief that your word matters. You have a choice. You can protect your comfort by breaking small promises, or you can protect your identity by keeping them. Small promises are not small. They are votes for who you are becoming. Many people sabotage themselves by setting unrealistic goals, then breaking them. That pattern teaches the nervous system that commitments are flexible. Disciplined people set promises they can keep even on difficult days. They build reliability gradually. Consistency beats intensity. I do what I say, every time. No negotiation. Finishing tasks is one of the fastest ways to rebuild self-trust. Unfinished tasks create mental noise. They drain attention. They signal incompleteness. Disciplined people finish. They do not wait for perfect conditions. They close the loop. Completion creates relief, clarity, and momentum. You do not need their permission to finish quietly. You do not need validation to follow through. You have a choice. Each task completed is a deposit into your self-respect account. Reliability requires removing negotiation. Negotiation sounds reasonable. I'll do it later. I'll adjust the plan. I'll make it up tomorrow. Negotiation erodes standards. Disciplined people decide once. Then they execute without debate. I do what I say, every time. No negotiation. Closing loops is powerful because it reduces cognitive load. When your mind is not tracking unfinished business, focus improves. Energy returns. Discipline becomes easier because fewer decisions remain open. This is not psychological theory. It is practical control. You have a choice. You can live with constant open loops, or you can experience the calm of completion. Completion builds confidence without noise. Self-respect grows when behavior aligns with intention. When alignment breaks, doubt appears. Doubt leads to hesitation. Hesitation leads to excuses. Reliability breaks that cycle. I do what I say, every time. No negotiation. This chapter is not about perfection. It is about honesty. Do not promise what you will not do. Reduce commitments until they are non-negotiable. Then honor them. That is discipline. You do not need their permission to simplify your goals. You do not need approval to lower quantity and raise consistency. You have a choice. Reliability beats ambition without follow-through. People who trust themselves move faster. They do not waste energy convincing themselves to act. Action is assumed. That assumption is power. I do what I say. Every time, no negotiation. You have now removed behaviors that weaken discipline and installed behaviors that strengthen it. Reliability creates a stable base, but stability alone is not enough. To sustain momentum, you must understand the difference between temporary drive and lasting structure. You have become reliable to yourself. Now you must learn what keeps that reliability alive when motivation fades. Discipline must outlast emotion. Chapter 9, Quiet Discipline. Outlasts loud motivation. Motivation is loud. It announces itself. It feels powerful, emotional, and convincing. Discipline is quiet. It does not argue. It does not inspire. It simply repeats. That is the key. Motivation is temporary. Discipline is mechanical and repeatable. You do not rise when motivated. You rise when disciplined. You have a choice. You can wait for emotional drive, or you can build systems that operate without it. Most people rely on motivation because it feels good. It feels like movement before movement happens. But motivation fades quickly because it is tied to mood, energy, and external input. When those change, motivation disappears. Discipline does not depend on how you feel. It depends on what you decided. That decision, repeated daily, creates progress. You do not rise when motivated. You rise when disciplined. Look at hype-driven effort. It starts strong. People get excited. They make big declarations. They overhaul everything at once. For a short time, activity increases. Then reality arrives. Fatigue appears. Boredom sets in. Motivation drops. The system collapses because there was no system, only emotion. Now look at system-driven progress. It is quiet. It is often unnoticed. It does not require excitement. The work happens because it is scheduled. The habit executes because it is embedded. There is no debate. This approach looks slow at first. Over time, it becomes unstoppable. You have a choice. You can build intensity or you can build infrastructure. Intensity burns fast. Infrastructure compounds. Quiet discipline is powerful because it does not depend on validation. It does not need recognition. It does not require an audience. It survives bad days. It survives low energy. It survives doubt. Motivation collapses under pressure. Discipline adapts. You do not rise when motivated. You rise when disciplined. Think about people who constantly seek motivation. They watch videos. They read quotes. They look for emotional triggers. That behavior creates dependency. They need to feel inspired before acting. Disciplined people invert the process. They act first. Emotion follows later, if it arrives at all. You do not need their permission to act without enthusiasm. You do not need approval to work without excitement. You have a choice. You can train yourself to move regardless of mood, or you can remain dependent on feeling ready. Discipline is mechanical. That is why it works. It relies on structure, not willpower. Alarms, schedules, checklists, routines. These are not restrictive. They are liberating. They remove decision fatigue. They reduce emotional interference. They allow action to happen automatically. You do not rise when motivated. You rise when disciplined. Motivation tells you who you want to be. Discipline decides who you become. Wanting is emotional. Becoming is behavioral. The gap between the two is closed through repetition. Real-world performers understand this. Athletes train on schedule, not when inspired. Professionals show up whether they feel like it or not. They trust the system because the system works. Over time, results accumulate quietly. Then suddenly, people call it talent. That is the illusion. There is no sudden rise. There is only quiet discipline compounded over time. You have a choice. You can chase the feeling of motivation, or you can commit to the process of discipline. One feels exciting, the other produces outcomes. Loud motivation seeks visibility. Quiet discipline seeks completion. Loud motivation wants immediate payoff. Quiet discipline accepts delayed results. Delayed results are where real transformation lives. You do not rise when motivated. You rise when disciplined. Notice how disciplined people speak about their work. They do not exaggerate effort. They do not dramatize struggle. They treat action as normal. That normalization removes friction. When discipline becomes normal, resistance decreases. Motivation frames effort as special. Discipline frames effort as standard. Standards create consistency. Consistency creates identity. You do not need their permission to be consistent. You do not need applause to repeat basics. You have a choice. Repeat what works or search endlessly for something new. Most people abandon systems because they are boring. They want variety. They want excitement. Disciplined people accept boredom as part of mastery. They do not confuse boredom with ineffectiveness. They stay. You do not rise when motivated. You rise when disciplined. Quiet discipline also protects you from emotional volatility. On good days, you do the work. On bad days, you do the work. The output may vary, but the behavior does not disappear. That reliability builds trust in yourself. Self-trust removes hesitation. When you trust yourself to act regardless of mood, anxiety decreases. Decision-making simplifies. You stop negotiating with yourself. That is freedom. You have a choice. You can let emotion decide your output, or you can let structure carry you forward. Emotion is unstable. Structure endures. Motivation is useful, but it is not reliable. Discipline is reliable, but it is not glamorous. The people who win long-term choose reliability over glamour. You do not rise when motivated, you rise when disciplined. This chapter is not asking you to eliminate motivation. It is asking you to stop depending on it. Motivation can visit. Discipline must stay. Discipline is what remains when motivation leaves. You have now built a foundation that does not collapse under emotional shifts. You are no longer dependent on hype, excitement, or inspiration. You are operating on standards. You have removed complaints. You have eliminated excuses. You have regulated emotion. You have built routine. You have stopped explaining yourself. You have protected focus. You have challenged comfort. You have become reliable to yourself. You have replaced motivation with discipline. There is only one step left. All of this discipline must be directed towards something that cannot be argued with, something that ends all discussion. Outcomes. You have learned how discipline outlasts motivation. Now you must understand the final truth. In the end, there is only one measure that matters. Chapter 10. Results are the only apology. In the end, no one cares how hard it felt. No one cares how unfair it was. No one cares how much you tried. These are not cruel statements. They are accurate ones. Life does not reward effort. It rewards outcomes. That is the key. Results are the only apology. You have a choice. You can explain your struggle, or you can deliver an outcome. Only one closes the conversation. Most people want their effort to be recognized. They want context to matter. They want their intentions to count. But intention does not build trust. Execution does. The world responds to what you produce, not what you planned. This is not injustice. This is clarity. Outcome-based living removes confusion. It removes debate. It removes emotional bargaining. Either the result exists or it does not. That clarity is uncomfortable at first because it removes excuses. It removes sympathy. It removes the ability to hide behind effort. But it also removes doubt. You always know where you stand. No complaints, no excuses, just results. When you adopt this standard, your behavior changes. You stop talking about how busy you are. You stop explaining why something was difficult. You stop seeking understanding. You focus on delivery. Delivery becomes your language. You have a choice. You can continue living in a world of explanations, or you can move into a world of outcomes. One keeps you stuck. The other moves you forward. People who live by outcomes do not argue. They do not justify. They do not defend. They deliver. That delivery builds credibility. Credibility compounds. Over time, your reputation is no longer something you manage. It is something others recognize. No complaints, no excuses, just results. This standard does not make you cold. It makes you effective. It does not deny effort. It simply refuses to reward it without proof. Effort is expected. Results are respected. Look at any high-stakes environment: business, competition, leadership, performance. Effort is invisible. Outcomes are everything. This is not pressure. This is freedom. When you accept that results are the only apology, you stop trying to be liked. You start trying to be effective. You do not need their permission to be outcome-driven. You do not need approval to raise your standards. You have a choice. You can lower expectations to protect feelings, or you can raise expectations to produce results. Outcome-based living forces honesty. You cannot hide behind complexity. You cannot blame circumstances endlessly. You must adapt. Adaptation is power. No complaints, no excuses, just results. When something does not work, you do not explain why it should have. You adjust. When something fails, you do not narrate frustration. You correct. This mindset removes emotional drag. It accelerates learning. This is not about being harsh with yourself. It is about being clear. Clarity removes anxiety. Anxiety thrives in ambiguity. When outcomes are the measure, you always know what to do next. Improve the process, refine the system, execute again. You have a choice. You can continue apologizing with words, or you can apologize with improvement. Improvement ends discussion. Words extend it. No complaints, no excuses, just results. This principle applies everywhere. Your work, your habits, your relationships. Reliability is proven through behavior, not promises. Respect is earned through consistency, not explanation. Trust is built through outcomes, not intention. People who live this way become calm. Calm comes from knowing that nothing needs to be defended. The work speaks. Silence becomes comfortable. Authority grows. You do not need to announce your effort. You do not need to justify your pace. You have a choice. You can work quietly and let results surface, or you can stay visible and remain stagnant. Outcome-based living also removes resentment. When you stop expecting recognition for effort, you stop feeling overlooked. You judge yourself by what you produce. That internal standard is stabilizing. No complaints, no excuses, just results. This book began by stripping away weakness, complaining, excuses, emotional leakage, inconsistency, explanation, distraction, comfort. You replace them with discipline, routine, focus, reliability, structure. Now, all of that discipline is pointed at one thing: outcomes. Outcomes end debate. Outcomes end doubt. Outcomes end excuses. You have a choice. Starting now, measure yourself by what you finish, not by what you feel. Measure your days by what moves forward, not by what drains you. Measure your life by what you build, not by what you explain. No complaints, no excuses, just results. This is not motivation. This is a standard. Carry it with you. Let it guide every decision. When you are tempted to explain, deliver. When you are tempted to complain, execute. When you are tempted to quit, refine. Results are the only apology. You do not need more information. You need fewer explanations. From today forward, remove the language of weakness from your life. No more complaining about what you tolerate. No more excuses for what you refuse to change. No more waiting to feel ready. You build mental toughness by doing what must be done, especially when you don't feel like it. Let your discipline be quiet. Let your results be loud. This is your standard now. Carry it into every day. And if you ever feel tempted to explain, complain, or quit, remember the rule. No complaints, no excuses, just results.